Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to challenge some deeply ingrained beliefs about what's actually sitting in your glass right now. For generations, milk was just a staple, right? The ultimate wholesome beverage. But recently, the dairy aisle has become one of the most confusing places in the entire grocery store. Between plant-based alternatives, raw milk trends, and the endless debates over fat content, it's incredibly hard to know what's actually good for you. So, let's dive right into this simple question framing our whole analysis today. Have we just been dead wrong about milk for decades? Have we been unfairly demonizing full-fat dairy? And are those trendy plant-based alternatives really the one-to-one nutritional replacements we think they are? Today, we're going to strip away all the marketing hype and look purely at the science. To figure that out, we've structured this explainer around four major areas of recent research: plant drinks versus cow's milk, the skin health connection, boosting bone mineral density, and finally, the full-fat dairy redemption. All right, section 1, plant drinks versus cow's milk. Let's kick things off with the ultimate nutritional showdown between traditional dairy and the exploding plant-based market. You can barely order a coffee these days without being asked if you want oat, almond, or soy. But what actually happens when we put these alternatives under a literal microscope? Well, a massive study by Agroscope in Switzerland did exactly that. They took 27 different plant-based drinks from 8 different sources. We're talking everything from almond and cashew to hemp, oat, rice, soy, and spelt. And they painstakingly compared their exact proteins, carbs, fats, vitamins, and minerals right against whole cow's milk. And looking at the data, it's pretty wild how much cow's milk just absolutely towers over the unfortified plant alternatives when it comes to mineral content. The milk column is stacked incredibly high with phosphorus, potassium, zinc, and crucially, calcium. The researchers found that rice, oats, spelt, and coconut drinks were honestly just really low in minerals across the board. In fact, unless a plant drink was artificially fortified, it had significantly lower calcium levels than milk. Plus, certain vitamins, like vitamin C, A, and K2, were only even detectable in the cow's milk. The contrast is just as stark when we switch over to amino acids, the essential building blocks of protein. As you can clearly see with the data, soy is literally the only plant source that even comes close to hitting milk's totals. The crude protein in these plant beverages was all over the map. It went from a tiny 0.6 grams per kilogram in rice drinks all the way up to 43 grams in soy, which actually puts soy right in the same neighborhood as traditional milk. But, as we know, total protein isn't the whole story.
Right, so the really crucial point is captured here in the Digestible Indispensable Amino Acid Score, or DIAS. Basically, this measures protein quality, meaning how well our bodies can actually absorb and use those amino acids. Look at cow's milk up top. It scores in the excellent bracket, well over 100%. Soy puts up a good fight, sitting securely in the good bracket. But then look at oat and almond drinks down at the bottom. They plummet into the low-quality bracket at under 75%. So the researchers concluded that, based purely on measured nutrients, plant-based beverages just can't be considered nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk right now.
Moving on to section 2, the skin health connection. Stepping away from macronutrients for a second, let's explore how milk directly impacts our largest organ, our skin. We always hear about milk and bones, but its effect on dermatology is a massive, ongoing area of study. And it presents this fascinating biological duality. On one hand, milk is actually fantastic for your skin. It's packed with retinol, a form of vitamin A that's famous for anti-aging, along with vitamin D and antioxidants that help give you a natural, healthy glow. But on the flip side, ingesting dairy aggressively stimulates certain hormones, specifically insulin, insulin-like growth factor 1, and androgens. And for some folks, those hormonal spikes are the exact triggers that cause severe acne breakouts. So who actually needs to hit pause on their dairy intake? Well, if you fall into this specific demographic, especially if you're between the ages of 7 and 30 and you already lean towards being acne-prone, the hormonal shifts triggered by dairy might mean you should skip that glass. Dermatologists point to a really strong positive scientific association between drinking milk and acne risk for these groups. Interestingly, though, fermented dairy, like yogurt, might actually help skin conditions because of the probiotics. But standard liquid milk, yeah, that can definitely be a trigger if you're prone to breakouts. Okay, section 3. Boosting bone mineral density.
We've all heard the old slogan that milk builds strong bones. But how solid is the clinical data, especially as we get older? We'll take a look at this number, 618. That is the exact number of healthy postmenopausal women analyzed across 6 incredibly rigorous randomized controlled trials.
a major systematic review published in the Archives of Osteoporosis pulled all this data together to figure out exactly how dairy, primarily milk, impacts bone mineral density in this highly vulnerable demographic. What this meta-analysis proves is a clear timeline of structural fortification. The researchers didn't just take a quick snapshot, they really tracked the progress over time. By the 12-month mark of consistent dairy consumption, they saw a significant positive effect in the bone mineral density of the total hip. Fast forward to 18 months, and there's a significant positive effect in the femoral neck. They also noted overall improvements in the lumbar spine and total body. So the takeaway was crystal clear here. Dairy consumption really should be considered an effective public health measure for preventing osteoporosis in postmenopausal women. And finally, Section 4, the full-fat dairy redemption. This brings us to arguably the most surprising research of all, the Great Full-Fat Redemption. I mean, for decades, dietary guidelines have absolutely hammered it into our heads that we need to choose skim or low-fat dairy to protect our hearts and keep our waistlines in check, right? But the latest science is completely flipping that script. A recent 12-week clinical trial at the University of Toronto took 74 adults with overweight or obesity and had one group consume 3 daily servings of full-fat dairy. The results were honestly astonishing. Eating 3 servings of full-fat dairy every single day resulted in no meaningful weight gain, 0 increase in body fat, and absolutely no negative effects on cholesterol or insulin resistance. Actually, the group eating the full-fat dairy showed improvements in blood pressure and, naturally, they took in way more calcium, protein, and vitamin D. So what's the mechanism here? Why is this happening? It all comes down to a fascinating concept called the dairy matrix hypothesis. Traditionally, nutritionists would look at saturated fat totally in isolation and just assume, hey, this is bad for you. But this new hypothesis argues that the physical structure of dairy foods literally changes everything. It means that the complex, combined structure of the whole food matters infinitely more than just pulling out one isolated nutrient on a nutrition label. Because of this unique matrix, the nutrients inside behave completely differently in your body. Think about whole milk. You've got casein and whey proteins tightly bound up together with fat, calcium, and all sorts of other nutrients. This intricate little web actually dictates how things are broken down in your gut. Because the saturated fat is locked inside this complex structure, your body absorbs the nutrients slowly and gradually. And that is exactly why we just don't see the negative health outcomes, like heart disease or crazy cholesterol spikes, that we usually associate with eating saturated fats all by themselves. It's an absolute game changer for how we understand food. We've unpacked some pretty undeniable data today. We've seen that plant milks, as popular as they are right now, often just lack the deep nutritional profile and protein quality you get from cow's milk. We've learned that milk is phenomenal for bone density as we age, even though, yeah, it requires a bit of caution if you've got acne-prone skin. And most importantly, we've seen that the whole "full fat is bad" warning label might be totally unwarranted, all thanks to the magic of the dairy matrix. So knowing all this complex science, what are you going to reach for the next time you're standing in the dairy aisle? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in to This Explainer, and keep learning.